Deeper, please, I can't take it anymore. The rancher froze and did the unthinkable. Rolling fields stretched for miles, dotted with grazing cows and the occasional horse, while the distant mountains cast long shadows over the land. The air smelled of fresh grass and earth, mixed with the faint scent of hay from the barns. For anyone passing by, it looked like a place untouched by worry or danger, a perfect picture of calm rural life. But life on a ranch was rarely simple, and today would prove that even the most peaceful days could be broken in an instant. The rancher, a man who had spent decades working this land, moved steadily across the open field, his worn boots crunching against the dry soil. His hands were rough from years of hard work, yet he handled them with care when feeding the animals or repairing fences. He had grown used to the routine, the early mornings, the long hours under the sun, the careful tending of every living creature that called his ranch home. Life was simple, predictable, and satisfying. But routine, he knew, was fragile, and sometimes it was broken by the most unexpected events. As he walked past the old barn, a sudden cry shattered the quiet. It was faint at first, almost like the wind, but then it became clearer. "Deeper, please, I can't take it anymore." The words pierced the air with urgency, filled with fear and desperation. The rancher froze where he stood. His heart skipped a beat, and instinct immediately kicked in. He had learned long ago that cries for help should never be ignored, yet something about the tone made him hesitate. It wasn't just fear in the voice. It was raw, unfiltered panic, the kind that could make anyone feel helpless. He scanned the horizon. The sun was sinking lower, casting a golden glow across the fields, but shadows were already stretching across the ground, hiding every small movement in darkness. The rancher's eyes darted between the barn, the fields, and the nearby woods. There was no sign of anyone. He knew the land well, every tree, every fence, every hidden ditch, but this cry seemed to come from nowhere. The rancher's mind raced. Was it a lost hiker, someone trapped in the woods, or a worker caught in an accident? He couldn't tell, but the urgency in the voice demanded action. He moved quickly toward the sound, every sense on high alert. His footsteps were cautious but determined, avoiding loose stones and dry grass that could betray his approach. Each step seemed louder in the stillness of the afternoon. As he drew closer, the cry came again, louder this time, more desperate. The rancher's stomach tightened. Something bad was happening, and he was the only one who could help. The voice led him to a small clearing near the edge of the forest. There, partially hidden by thick bushes, he saw a person. The figure was crouched low, trembling, with hands gripping something unseen in the shadows. The rancher's breath caught. He could see the fear in their eyes, hear the strain in their voice, and sense the panic in every shivering movement. The person was in trouble, and it was clear they couldn't get out alone. For a moment, the rancher hesitated. The instinct to help warred with the fear of what might happen next. He knew the dangers of rushing into unknown situations, the possibility of injury, the unknown terrain, and the potential for things to go wrong. But the sound of that desperate voice reminded him of all the reasons he had learned to act without hesitation when someone needed help. Memories of past rescues flashed through his mind. The calf stuck in the mud, the horse caught in the fence, the neighbor who had fallen on his property. Each memory reinforced the lesson that courage often required immediate action, even when fear demanded caution. The person looked up at him, their eyes wide with terror. "Please, I can't do this alone," they cried, voice shaking. The rancher took a deep breath, his own heart pounding, and stepped closer. Every movement was deliberate, careful, and measured. He knew that one wrong step could make the situation worse, but standing still was no longer an option. As he approached, he began to assess the scene. The ground was uneven, littered with rocks and fallen branches. The bushes around the clearing were thick, making it difficult to see exactly what had trapped the person. The rancher's experience on the land allowed him to quickly judge the safest path forward. He moved slowly, speaking in a calm, steady voice. "It's okay. I'm here to help. Stay calm and we'll get through this." His words were meant to reassure, to anchor the person in the midst of panic. The person's body shook violently, but they nodded, grasping onto any hope the rancher offered. The rancher could feel their fear, the way their muscles tensed, their breaths coming in rapid, shallow bursts. It was clear that whatever they were caught in, it had drained their strength and their courage. He remembered something his father had once told him. In moments of fear, calmness is more powerful than strength. One steady presence can make all the difference. He took a closer look, noticing small clues about the situation. The person's clothes were torn, dirt smeared across their hands and knees. They were exhausted, struggling to maintain balance, and clearly terrified of whatever lay just beyond the visible clearing. The rancher understood immediately that this was no ordinary incident. It required not just physical help, but mental reassurance, a steady hand guiding someone through panic and fear. The rancher reached out slowly, letting the person feel his presence before attempting any physical assistance. "I've got you," he said softly. "Take my hand. We'll get you out of this." The person hesitated, fear still holding them back, but the rancher's steady gaze and calm tone finally encouraged them to reach out. Their fingers barely touched, but it was enough. A connection had been made. With careful movements, the rancher began guiding the person through the clearing, avoiding hazards, and making sure each step was secure. Every step forward was a small victory, a move from despair to hope. The rancher could feel the tension in their body gradually easing, replaced by cautious trust. He knew the journey wasn't over, but this first moment of progress was critical. As they moved together, the rancher kept talking, offering encouragement, small instructions, and reassurance. "Slowly, steady, you're doing fine." Each word seemed to strengthen the person, giving them the courage to take the next step. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, but the rancher barely noticed. His focus was entirely on the person in front of him, guiding them, supporting them, and keeping them safe. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only moments, they reached the edge of the forest. The person looked up at him, exhausted, tears streaking their dirty face. "Thank you, I thought I'd never get out," they whispered. The rancher simply nodded, too focused on catching his own breath to speak. He had acted on instinct, experience, and compassion, and in that moment, all of those qualities had combined to save a life. Even as they walked back toward the ranch together, the rancher knew that the memory of this day would stay with him forever. The cry that had shattered the peace of the afternoon had also awakened something deeper, the understanding that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. The calm ranch, with its grazing animals and quiet fields, would never seem quite the same again. The echo of those desperate words would linger, a reminder that life could change in an instant, and that one person's courage could make all the difference. The person finally seemed a little calmer, though the fear still lingered in their eyes. Their hands trembled, their breaths came in uneven gasps, and their clothes were torn and streaked with dirt from struggling in the clearing. The rancher kept his own movements slow and deliberate, knowing that any sudden motion could startle them again. He led the way back toward the ranch, stepping carefully over roots, rocks, and fallen branches. Every step was measured, but every step also brought them closer to safety. The rancher's mind, however, was not at ease. He had saved many animals and faced dangers of storms, fire, and stray cattle over the years, but humans were different. Humans could panic, resist, or react unpredictably. He kept glancing at the person, noting the tension in their shoulders and the way their eyes darted to every shadow in the trees. It was clear that even though they were moving forward, they were still trapped in the memory of whatever had caused their fear. "Can you tell me what happened?" the rancher asked gently, keeping his voice low and calm. He knew that forcing answers could make the person retreat into themselves, but he needed to understand what they had gone through. The person hesitated, swallowing hard, as if each word was heavy and difficult to release. Finally, with a shaky voice, they spoke. I was trying to reach the water source near the creek, they began. I slipped, and then I fell into this ditch. I couldn't climb out. Every time I tried, it got worse. I thought I'd be stuck there forever. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Their voice broke and they swallowed again, trying to push down the tears. The rancher nodded, understanding perfectly. The fear of being trapped, unable to escape, was something even the strongest person could struggle with. They moved slowly, inch by inch, out of the thick forest and closer to the open fields. The rancher could feel the weight of relief gradually settling over the person, but he also knew that the ordeal wasn't over. Their body was exhausted, muscles cramped and stiff from the struggle, and their mind was still racing from the panic. It would take time for them to fully recover, but at least now they were out of immediate danger. The rancher kept talking, not just to give instructions, but to anchor them, to help them feel safe in the presence of another human being. "Almost there," he said softly. "Just a little further. You're doing great. Keep moving with me." The person's grip on his hand tightened slightly, and he could feel the small but important trust forming between them. It was fragile but real. As they emerged from the forest's edge, the open field stretched before them, bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. The rancher's eyes scanned the horizon, noting the distance to the main ranch buildings. It was close enough that they could make it safely if they kept going steadily, but far enough that they needed to remain careful. The wind carried the faint scent of animals, hay, and soil, grounding them in the familiar reality of the ranch, a stark contrast to the terror they had just experienced. The rancher's mind drifted back to the moments before he had arrived. He remembered the first cry, sharp and full of desperation, and the instant freeze that had gripped him. Every instinct in his body had screamed to run toward the danger, yet his mind had measured the risks. He had thought of the uneven ground, the hidden holes, the possibility that the person might panic even more at the sight of him. He had considered calling for help, but instinctively he had known that no one else could reach them in time. He had to act. That realization had pushed him forward, despite the fear that tightened his chest. As they continued across the field, the person's voice returned, quieter now but still shaky. I don't know how to thank you," they said. The rancher shook his head gently. "Just stay with me for now. We'll get you inside and then we'll talk about everything." The reassurance seemed to calm them a little more, and the pace of their steps grew steadier. The rancher could feel their strength returning, just enough to keep moving, enough to survive. They passed the old barn, now casting long shadows in the late afternoon sun. The rancher noticed the way the person's eyes lingered on the structure, a mixture of caution and hope. The barn, usually a symbol of routine and labor, now seemed like a refuge. They needed shelter, rest, and a moment to regain their balance. The rancher led them past the fence, careful to avoid the loose wire and broken planks that could have caused injury. Every action was deliberate, every choice focused on safety and support. As they approached the ranch house, the rancher began to notice other details he had overlooked earlier. The exhaustion on the person's face, the dirt under their fingernails, the way their body wobbled slightly with every step. It all told a story of struggle and survival. The rancher's heart ached with empathy, and he reminded himself to stay calm, to provide stability in the face of someone else's chaos. He had learned long ago that panic could spread like wildfire. Calmness was contagious too. Finally, they reached the porch of the ranch house. The person paused, leaning heavily against the wooden railing, taking in deep, shuddering breaths. The rancher stepped beside them, giving them space but remaining a steady presence. "You made it," he said softly. "You're safe now." Their eyes met his, wide with disbelief, relief, and lingering fear. The rancher knew that even though the immediate danger was over, the memory of the event would stay with them for a long time. Trauma could linger, but so could gratitude and trust. Inside the ranch house, the warmth of the hearth and the familiar smell of wood and earth welcomed them. The person sank into a chair, trembling slightly, and the rancher handed them a glass of water. "Drink slowly," he instructed. "You need to rehydrate." They nodded, their hands shaking as they took the glass. The rancher watched carefully, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. Even the simple act of sitting, drinking, and breathing could feel overwhelming after such terror. The rancher decided to give them a few minutes alone, though he stayed nearby. He moved quietly to the kitchen, preparing a small snack and reflecting on what had just happened. The rush of adrenaline from the rescue was fading, leaving behind a heavy awareness of how fragile life could be. One wrong step, one missed movement, and the outcome could have been completely different. He had acted decisively, guided by experience and instinct, but he also knew that luck had played a part. After a few moments, he returned to the person, who was now sipping the water more steadily. "Do you want to talk about what happened?" he asked gently. They nodded slowly, the fear still present but tempered by the relief of being safe. I don't even know how it happened so fast. One moment I was walking toward the creek and the next, I was trapped. I thought no one would find me," they admitted, voice trembling. The rancher nodded, understanding perfectly. The suddenness of accidents could shake even the strongest minds. As the evening wore on, the person gradually began to regain some composure. The rancher listened patiently as they recounted the moments leading up to the incident. Every detail mattered: the slip on the rocks, the sudden drop into the ditch, the fear of being alone. The rancher asked questions only to clarify, never to rush them, allowing the person to process the experience in their own time. Each answer they gave, each movement they made, seemed to restore a little confidence. By the time night fell, the rancher had prepared a small bed for the person in the guest room. They looked tired but calmer, the first sign that the worst of the panic was behind them. The rancher made sure everything was safe, comfortable, and ready for them to rest. He knew that sleep would help them heal, even if the mental scars remained. Before leaving the room, he gave them one last reassuring word: "You're safe here. We'll figure everything out tomorrow." They nodded, eyes heavy but grateful, and finally allowed themselves to relax. The rancher stepped out into the quiet night, taking a moment to breathe deeply. The ranch was calm again, the fields bathed in moonlight, yet he knew that the events of today had changed more than just one person. Life on the ranch could return to routine, but the memory of courage, fear, and survival would linger, shaping both the rancher and the person he had saved. The next morning, the ranch was quiet under a pale sun, but inside the house the atmosphere was tense. The person who had been rescued the day before had barely slept, their mind replaying the fear of the ditch, the suffocating panic, and the desperation they had felt. The rancher moved quietly around the kitchen, preparing breakfast and keeping his ears open for any sounds. He understood that trauma could linger, that the body often recovered faster than the mind, and that patience would be as important as any physical help. "Good morning," the rancher said softly as he entered the dining area. The person stirred in their seat, blinking against the light that filtered through the curtains. Their face was pale, eyes wide, and there was still a tension in their shoulders that had not yet eased. "How are you feeling?" he asked, carefully choosing words that would encourage honesty without pressure. I feel strange," they admitted. "Like my body is awake, but my mind is still there, back in the ditch." Their voice trembled, but they looked at the rancher, a flicker of trust present. The rancher nodded, recognizing the lingering effects of extreme fear. He poured a cup of warm tea and set it gently in front of them. "That's normal," he said calmly. "It will take time. We'll take it slowly. You're safe here, and nothing will happen unless we decide to move carefully together. The rancher suggested they start with small, simple tasks to regain confidence in movement. They began with walking slowly around the yard, the morning sun warming their backs, the wind rustling gently through the grass. At first, every step was hesitant. The person's muscles were tight, and every sound, cawing crows, distant cattle, the creak of the barn door made them jump. The rancher stayed close, guiding each step with patience, showing that fear could be managed when supported. "See that fence?" the rancher asked after a while. "Walk alongside it, step by step. You'll notice how steady the ground is. It won't collapse. Nothing will surprise you here." The person nodded, gripping the wooden rail, and slowly walked along it, testing the terrain. Their body responded, each movement building confidence, however small. The rancher allowed silence at times, knowing that words could sometimes increase tension. The steady rhythm of walking, feeling solid ground underfoot, and the calm presence beside them all worked together to rebuild trust in their own senses. As they moved farther into the fields, the rancher decided it was time to revisit the location of the ditch. He spoke cautiously. "I want to show you something. Don't worry, we're not going in, just near it. It's important to see it from a safe distance. You'll realize it isn't as scary as it seemed." The person hesitated but trusted him. They followed at a careful pace, stepping over tufts of grass, loose soil, and fallen branches. Every step was deliberate, a mix of fear and determination, yet with the rancher's guidance it became possible. When they reached the edge of the area where the ditch had trapped them, the person froze, gripping the rancher's arm. I can't," they whispered. The rancher nodded, giving them time. "It's okay," he said softly. "Look from here, breathe, you don't have to go closer yet. Just seeing it from a safe spot is the first step." They looked, their eyes tracing the uneven ground, the dip in the earth, and the rocks that had caused their fall. Seeing it from a distance, it no longer seemed like an endless trap, but a challenge that could be understood and managed. The rancher watched carefully as they adjusted their stance, slowly breathing, beginning to regain a sense of control over their fear. After a while, the rancher guided them to the nearby creek. The water flowed gently over smooth stones, reflecting the morning light. It was peaceful, almost serene, and he encouraged them to focus on the calmness of the creek. "Listen to the water," he said. "Notice how it moves, steady, constant. Life flows even after difficult moments. You can find your balance again." The person kneeled at the edge, dipping their fingers into the cool water. The sensation, simple as it was, seemed to bring a grounding effect. They looked at the rancher, a small smile forming, a glimmer of hope that perhaps fear could be faced and managed. The rancher suggested small challenges to rebuild their confidence. Walking across the uneven terrain, climbing gentle slopes, and eventually stepping near the very edge of the ditch from a safe distance. Each attempt was met with encouragement, praise, and patience. The person's trembling lessened, their breathing steadied, and their eyes began to show determination alongside fear. The rancher reminded them at every step that progress was measured in small victories, not leaps, and that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to continue despite it. Mid-morning brought a sudden surprise. A stray calf had wandered close to the forest, caught in the thicket of branches and brambles. The rancher's instincts kicked in immediately. "Stay here," he said calmly, but the person stepped forward, a spark of courage shining in their eyes. I can help," they whispered. The rancher studied them for a moment, then nodded slowly. Together, they moved carefully toward the calf. The person watched closely, mimicking the rancher's cautious approach, and soon, with gentle coaxing and steady hands, they helped guide the frightened animal back to safety. The sense of accomplishment was transformative. The person's confidence grew not from words but from action. They realized that fear could be confronted, that challenges could be met when approached step by step, and that help could be a guide rather than a crutch. The rancher watched silently, a quiet pride swelling in his chest. This was the true work, not just rescuing someone physically, but guiding them to rediscover their own strength and ability to face fear. By noon, they returned to the ranch house for a light meal. Conversation flowed slowly, carefully, filled with pauses to reflect, rest, and process. The rancher listened as the person recounted their experience, the exact moment of fear, and the struggle to stay conscious. They admitted how hopeless it had felt, how trapped and alone, and the rancher nodded, validating every emotion. "It's okay to feel that way," he said. "What matters is that you're here now, learning to take the next step, one step at a time." The afternoon brought another challenge. A small section of fencing near the horses had fallen overnight, creating a minor hazard. The rancher suggested they work together to fix it. The task was simple, yet it required focus, problem-solving, and careful movement. The person hesitated at first but soon engaged, picking up tools, holding planks, and assisting under the rancher's guidance. Each action reinforced their confidence and capability, proving that fear from one moment did not define their future ability. By the time the fence was repaired, their body language had changed, posture straighter, movement steadier, and eyes less haunted by panic. Evening approached, casting long shadows across the fields. The person stood near the porch, gazing at the horizon, and the rancher joined them in silence. No words were necessary. The day had been filled with small victories, tests of courage, and the slow rebuilding of trust in their own strength. The rancher knew that the experience would leave lasting effects, but now, for the first time since the incident, the person seemed capable of seeing beyond immediate fear. They could visualize moving forward without panic controlling every step. Before nightfall, the rancher prepared a warm bath in a quiet room for the person. They soaked, letting the warmth ease tense muscles and calm the mind. Afterwards, they sat quietly by the fireplace, sipping herbal tea, talking in soft tones about ordinary things, animals, the land, and memories of safer times. The conversation was grounding, helping the person reconnect with the simple rhythms of life and the reality of safety. As night settled over the ranch, the person finally allowed themselves to rest, curling under blankets with a deep sense of relief. The rancher watched over them, noting the subtle changes, the easing of tension in the shoulders, the steadier breath, the less fearful gaze. They had faced terror and survived it, not only with the rancher's help but through their own growing courage. The rancher understood that the work was not yet done, but the progress was undeniable. Courage, he thought, often begins in the smallest moments, the willingness to move one foot forward when every instinct screams to freeze. The rancher stepped outside, looking at the moonlit fields and listening to the soft night sounds of the ranch. It had been a day of lessons, both for him and the person he had rescued. Fear had been confronted, trust had been built, and the first steps toward healing had been taken. Yet even in the quiet, the rancher knew that life could bring more challenges, more moments of panic and uncertainty. What mattered most was the ability to act, to remain calm, and to guide others with patience and courage. Tonight, the ranch was still. Tomorrow they would continue the journey, facing new challenges, testing boundaries, and learning that even after terror, life could be reclaimed step by step. But tonight there was calm, and that calm, fragile though it was, marked the beginning of real recovery. The next morning the ranch was bathed in soft sunlight, yet the calm of the day was deceptive. Even after the small victories of yesterday, the rancher knew the true test was still ahead. The person he had rescued was stronger now, but fear was never fully erased. It lingered like a shadow, waiting for the next challenge. The rancher moved quietly around the barn and the fields, preparing for another day of careful guidance. Today, they would face something more demanding, and it was up to him to lead the way. After breakfast, the rancher suggested they revisit the ditch area. "We won't go inside," he said gently, but we'll work close enough that you can understand it, see it clearly, and take control of your fear." The person's eyes widened slightly, hesitation still present. "Are you sure?" they asked. The rancher nodded calmly. "I'll be with you the whole time. You're ready for this step." Slowly, they walked toward the clearing, the path familiar now, yet every step still carried a tremor of past panic. As they approached the edge of the ditch, the person froze again, gripping the rancher's arm. I can't do it," they whispered. The rancher stopped, kneeling slightly so he could meet their eyes. "You can," he said softly, "and if you feel too scared, I'll support you. Remember, courage isn't about doing it perfectly. It's about trying, even when fear is strong." The person nodded, trembling, and took a slow, tentative step closer. The rancher noticed small signs of their growing strength. The way their breathing had steadied, the slight shift in posture, the tiny spark of determination in their eyes. He guided them further, encouraging them to look at the ditch, to examine its edges, and to understand that it was no longer a threat but a challenge they could face. Each step forward was a victory, a small but significant triumph over the panic that had gripped them before. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed from the nearby woods, a branch snapping under the weight of something unseen. The person froze violently, their body rigid with fear. The rancher held out a steadying hand. "It's okay," he said firmly. "It's just a sound. Nothing will harm you here." Slowly, he led them through a series of small, controlled movements to help them release the tension, teaching them to face sudden shocks without panic. The process was exhausting but necessary. Each moment of fear that could be managed strengthened their resilience. After several hours of careful steps, breathing exercises, and reassurance, the rancher suggested they take on a more physical challenge. A large fallen tree had blocked part of the forest path, creating a natural obstacle that required climbing, balance, and courage. The person hesitated, fear flickering across their face, but the rancher nodded encouragingly. "I'll be right beside you. You won't do this alone." Together, they approached the tree. The rancher demonstrated first, climbing over it with careful precision, showing the person exactly how to place their hands and feet. Then he turned to them. "You can do it the same way, step by step. If you slip, I'm here. Trust yourself and trust me." The person swallowed hard, their hands shaking, but with a deep breath they followed his instructions. One foot, then another, gripping branches and testing the ground. The rancher stayed close, ready to support them at every moment. Halfway across the fallen tree, a branch cracked unexpectedly. The person froze, heart racing, unsure if they could continue. The rancher placed a firm hand on their shoulder. "You can do this," he said. "You've made it this far. Don't let fear stop you now." Slowly, they took another step, then another, until finally they reached the other side. Relief flooded their expression, but it was quickly replaced by something else, a quiet pride, the kind that comes from overcoming a real challenge. The rancher guided them back toward the ditch, now with a different purpose. "We're going to do something important," he said calmly. "I need you to help me understand it from the inside." The person froze, panic returning. I can't," they whispered. The rancher knelt again, looking into their eyes. "You can, and you're not alone. I'll do everything with you. We'll face it together." After a long pause, the person nodded, trembling but willing to try. The rancher carefully guided them to a safe position at the edge, demonstrating every movement and reassuring them constantly. The person followed his instructions, feeling the rough soil under their hands, the uneven ground beneath their feet, and the slight incline leading into the ditch. Fear surged, but the rancher's calm presence gave them something to hold on to. They were no longer completely paralyzed by terror. They could move, they could act, and they could trust that help was close at hand. Then came the moment that would define the day. A large branch had fallen in a precarious position, threatening to block their path further if not moved. The rancher hesitated, knowing the risk. One wrong move, and it could pin the person or cause injury. His mind raced, weighing options, analyzing risks, and considering alternatives. Finally, he made a decision that surprised even himself. He would take the initiative, acting decisively to remove the obstacle while keeping the person safe. With careful planning, the rancher lifted the branch partially, guiding the person to step safely out of its path. His hands shook slightly with the strain, but his focus never wavered. Every movement was deliberate, every word measured to calm the person and prevent panic. The branch shifted slowly, then dropped safely aside, clearing the way. The rancher exhaled, relief washing over him, but he immediately turned his attention back to the person. "You did it," he said. "You faced it. You moved forward. And now the path is clear." The person's expression shifted from fear to awe. I actually did it," they whispered. The rancher nodded, a quiet smile on his face. "Yes, and you'll keep doing it, step by step, challenge by challenge. Fear doesn't disappear, but you can overcome it." The person's trembling lessened, replaced by a growing sense of accomplishment. For the first time since the incident, they felt capable, strong, and in control. As they made their way back to the open field, the rancher reflected on what had just happened. Courage, he realized, was not simply the absence of fear. It was the willingness to act despite it, to take responsibility, and to guide others through the unknown. The person had faced their deepest terror, and he had helped them do it safely. The bond between them had grown stronger, built on trust, patience, and shared experience. By late afternoon, the person was exhausted but exhilarated. They had faced fear, navigated obstacles, and experienced the power of support and guidance. The rancher encouraged them to rest, assuring them that today's victories were real and that tomorrow would bring new lessons but not overwhelming danger. They settled near the porch, the sun warming their faces, the quiet of the ranch providing a sense of safety and normalcy. The rancher knew that the real test of resilience was not just surviving fear, but learning to act in the face of it. Today had shown that even the most terrifying situations could be faced with courage, support, and careful planning. The person had learned that they could trust themselves, trust others, and navigate challenges without being paralyzed by panic. As night fell, the rancher prepared the guest room and offered words of reassurance. "Sleep now," he said gently. "You've done more than you realized. Tomorrow will continue, but tonight rest." The person nodded, eyes heavy but calm, finally allowing themselves to relax. The rancher watched from the doorway, a quiet sense of pride and relief filling his chest. They had faced the unthinkable together, and survived stronger, braver, and more resilient. The morning sun rose slowly over the ranch, casting a warm glow over the fields and barns. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the faint smell of fresh grass and earth. After the intense experiences of the past 2 days, a quiet calm had settled over both the rancher and the person he had rescued. It was a calm earned through courage, trust, and the shared experience of overcoming fear. Though the ordeal had ended, its effects lingered in subtle ways: the twitch of a hand, the quickening of a breath, or the thoughtful gaze toward the edge of the forest. The rancher moved about his morning chores with a quiet purpose, but his thoughts were with the person in the guest room. He knew that recovery was not just physical. The mind needed time to catch up with the body. The rescued individual stirred, blinking against the morning light, and the rancher offered a gentle smile. "Good morning," he said softly. "How did you sleep?" The person sat up slowly, stretching and rubbing their eyes. "Better, but I still feel strange," they admitted. "Like part of me is still back there in the ditch." The rancher nodded, understanding perfectly. "That's normal," he said. "It takes time for the mind to fully trust that it's safe, but you've come a long way. Look at what you did yesterday. You faced fear, you moved forward, and you survived." After a light breakfast, the rancher suggested a gentle walk around the ranch. "We'll take it slow," he said. "No obstacles, no challenges. Just walk and breathe and let yourself feel safe." The person nodded, gripping the rancher's arm lightly as they stepped into the fresh morning air. Every step was deliberate, careful, yet filled with a growing confidence. The once paralyzing fear was still present, but it had been replaced, little by little, with the understanding that they could move forward safely. As they walked, the rancher shared stories from his own life, times when he had faced challenges on the ranch, moments when animals had been in danger, and times he had relied on calm thinking to make quick decisions. These stories were not just about survival, they were lessons in resilience, patience, and courage. The person listened intently, absorbing the knowledge and feeling the reassurance that came from shared experience. It was a subtle, powerful way to rebuild trust in the world after trauma. Mid-morning brought a small, unexpected challenge. A gate leading to a pasture had come loose, swinging in the wind and threatening to scare the horses. The rancher suggested that the person help him secure it. "It's small and safe," he said, "but it will give you a chance to practice focus and calm movement." The person hesitated, then nodded, gripping the latch carefully. Together, they fixed the gate step by step. Each successful motion, each careful placement of hands and feet reinforced their growing confidence. By the time the gate was secure, a quiet pride shone on their face. Later, they approached the edge of the forest again, not to confront fear directly, but to observe it from a safe distance. The rancher encouraged the person to notice details they had previously overlooked: the sunlight filtering through the trees, the gentle rustle of leaves, the way the ground rose and fell. "Look at it calmly," he said. "See that the danger isn't in the forest itself, but in the fear you feel when it surprises you. You can choose how to respond now." The person studied the scene, eyes wide but steady, realizing that they could face the memory without being controlled by it. After lunch, they spent the afternoon helping with routine chores around the ranch. The work was simple: feeding animals, carrying water, and tidying the barn, but each task was an opportunity to regain normalcy and focus. The rancher guided the person carefully, offering encouragement and small corrections without judgment. The sense of accomplishment grew with each completed chore, a reminder that ordinary actions could restore confidence after extraordinary fear. As evening approached, the rancher suggested a quiet moment by the creek. The water flowed gently, reflecting the warm colors of the setting sun. The person knelt by the edge, dipping their hands into the cool water, and watched the surface ripple. "It's peaceful," they whispered, voice soft but filled with awe. The rancher nodded. "Peace can come after chaos. You faced terror and survived, and now you're learning that calm can return too." The simple act of watching the water, feeling its coolness, and noticing the steady flow helped ground them in the present moment. That night, as the sky turned dark and stars began to appear, the rancher prepared the guest room for rest. The person sat quietly, reflecting on the past days. They had faced something terrifying, something that had pushed them to the limits of fear and uncertainty. Yet with guidance, patience, and courage, they had overcome it. The rancher's presence had been steady and reliable, a reminder that trust could be rebuilt and fear could be managed. Before sleep, they spoke quietly. "I don't think I could have done any of this without you," the person admitted. The rancher shook his head gently. "No," he said, "you did it yourself. I only guided you. Courage was always in you. All I did was help you see it." The words seemed to settle over them like a warm blanket, reinforcing the idea that they had agency, strength, and resilience. The next day, the rancher and the person began to plan a small hike along the safer trails of the ranch. This was not about pushing limits or confronting fear directly, but about rebuilding confidence in movement, observation, and trust in the environment. Step by step, they walked together, noticing small details: the way the wind shifted, the sounds of birds in the trees, the steady rise and fall of the ground beneath their feet. Each step was deliberate, careful, yet filled with the quiet satisfaction of progress. By mid-morning, they reached a small hill that overlooked the ranch. The view was breathtaking: rolling fields, the distant mountains, the barns and fences dotting the landscape, and the winding creek that had played such a crucial role in the events of the past days. The person stood silently, absorbing the scene, a sense of calm washing over them. The rancher stood beside them, proud and contemplative. The view was a symbol, not just of physical distance traveled, but of emotional progress made, of fear faced and managed, of courage realized. Over the next few hours, they returned to routine chores, reinforcing skills and confidence. Feeding the animals, repairing fences, and walking the fields became exercises in presence, patience, and trust. The rancher observed subtle changes. The person's posture was straighter, their gaze steadier, and their movements more assured. Fear was no longer controlling them. Instead, they were learning to coexist with it, to acknowledge it without letting it dominate. By evening, the rancher suggested one final reflection by the barn. They sat together on the porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The rancher spoke softly, summarizing the journey they had shared. You faced fear that could have paralyzed anyone. You learned to act despite it, to trust yourself and to trust others. That courage will stay with you. Life will always bring challenges, but now you know you can face them. The person nodded, tears glistening in their eyes, a mixture of relief, pride, and gratitude. The final night at the ranch was quiet and restorative. The person slept deeply, no longer haunted by the memory of the ditch, the panic, or the desperation. The rancher, sitting quietly outside under the stars, reflected on the journey as well. It had been a test not only of the person's courage, but of his own patience, judgment, and understanding. He realized that helping someone overcome fear was not about force or authority. It was about guidance, presence, and shared experience. Courage, he thought, was often revealed in the smallest moments, in tiny victories that added up to something powerful. In the days that followed, the person grew more independent, moving through the ranch with confidence, assisting in chores, and even exploring previously intimidating areas safely. They learned to trust themselves and their own judgment, recognizing that fear was natural but manageable. The rancher continued to offer guidance when needed, but he allowed space for growth and self-discovery. The bond between them, forged in moments of crisis, became one of mutual respect, trust, and quiet companionship. Eventually, the person prepared to leave the ranch, stronger, wiser, and more resilient than when they had arrived. They hugged the rancher tightly, expressing gratitude not just for the physical rescue, but for the guidance, patience, and understanding that had allowed them to reclaim their courage. The rancher smiled, feeling a deep satisfaction. "Remember," he said, "courage is inside you. Fear may return, but now you know how to face it." As the person walked away from the ranch, the fields stretching out under the morning sun, they carried more than memories. They carried a newfound strength, the knowledge that even in the darkest moments, courage and guidance could illuminate a path forward. The ranch returned to its quiet routine, animals grazing peacefully, the wind rustling through the fields, yet the echoes of bravery, trust, and survival lingered in the air, a reminder that extraordinary courage could be found in ordinary people when faced with the unthinkable.